All right. So, in the last class, we were looking at this randomized algorithm for 2SAT. Right? So, let's just recall that algorithm. Right? The randomized 2SAT algorithm. And the algorithm was as follows. Right? So, what you do is start with the assignment, which is all zeros. Okay. And you repeat k times the following. Okay. So what do? You if there exists a class Ci that is not satisfied by the assignment, then flip uniformly at random one of the literals in Ci, right? And if the new assignment satisfies phi, then you accept. Okay? You keep doing this, and then finally, if nothing has happened after the repetitions, you just reject. This was the algorithm that we saw in the last class. Right? And we made this the reason it was working, we made this observation that right, if the class Ci does not, if A does not satisfy the class Ci, then then there exists at least one literal whose value is different from every satisfying assignment, actually. This was the observation that we made, right? So if you're choosing uniformly at random, the hope is that you will actually hit that uh, literal whose value is different from every satisfying assignment, and therefore you're making progress, right? And the progress here, right, the measure of progress is the Hamming distance, right, to a fixed satisfying assignment. Call it S. Right, you're looking at the Hamming distance to this fixed satisfying assignment, and the hope is that each time you make this flip, you are reducing the Hamming distance. Right, Hamming distance is the number of bits where this assignment differs from that fixed satisfying assignment S. And the hope is that you might have initially, maybe the assignment is completely different from the satisfying assignment, but then at every step you're actually moving towards that satisfying assignment. Right? So the progress is in terms of the Hamming distance. It is possible that when you actually do this random flipping, right, in the when you start out with, you might have, say, just two clauses that were not satisfied, but this flipping can increase the number of clauses that are not satisfied. But we don't really care about the number of clauses that are being satisfied. That is not our measure of progress, but rather the Hamming distance to the fixed satisfying assignment. Right? This was the algorithm that we had, right? And we said that we can think of this as a random walk on a graph, right? So we said that you have this graph where you have n vertices. Okay? Call these vertices v0, v1, v2 till vn. Right? And then there are these edges, right? Where the first edge from v0 to v1, there's a value 1, and this edge has value at most half. This is at least half, right? And so on. This is also at least half, right? Because what you know is that in every clause there is at least one literal that is different from the satisfying assignment. So with probability at least half, you will pick that literal to be flipped, right? To flip that bit. So what happens is that you're actually having a random walk where you start from, say, in the worst case, you might be starting from the vertex V0, right? And then you walk along this graph, right? So you're basically walking along the graph with the probability given by the edge weights, right? Right, that's what is happening. And we said that instead of analyzing this random walk, right, we first in the beginning of the lecture last time, we analyzed the random walk where instead of less than or equal to, we had equal to in all these places, right? Instead of a less than or equal to, we had exactly equal to, and we analyzed the random walk where these were the probabilities, correct? And what we said is that this green random walk, the expected time to reach Vn, right, via the green random walk is same as the expected time as to reach Vn when you use the white random walk, right? Or not equal to, actually. I should say it is at least. Okay, so maybe I should just replace it. Right? Why is that the case? Well, in the white random walk, you're more likely to go towards Vn than going away from Vn, right? Because the probability of going forward is at least half. So you're more likely to go towards Vn as compared to the green random walk, where both probabilities are equal. Right? So in the white random walk, you're more likely to go towards Vn than away from Vn. Right? So if you bound the expected time to reach Vn via the green random walk, right, where both the edge weights have probability exactly equal to half, that is an upper bound on the expected time to reach Vn when you have the white random walk. Right? The white random walk corresponds to the satisfiability algorithm, right? And we analyze this green random walk by saying that if Tj was the expected running time, what we said was that Tn is 0, T0 is 1 plus T1, and for the remainders, Ti was 1 plus half into Ti minus 1 plus half into Ti plus 1. Right? You take one step from either T minus 1 or Ti plus 1, and so from Ti, you take one step either towards Vn or away from Vn with probability half. Right? And we analyzed this and we said that T0 was n squared. Right? This is where we were. So what it means is that the expected time to reach the expected time to find a satisfying assignment is at most n squared for the two-set algorithm. Okay, so this is what we have. This was what we did in the last lecture. Any questions on this? Any clarifications? Anything to clarify? Right. So this corresponds. So this is the random walk on the graph. So the randomized two-set algorithm. So if the formula phi is satisfiable, then in expected time n squared, you will find a satisfying assignment. Right. That is the expected number of stems that you should do the random walk. Right. So the random walk corresponds to this part of the code. Right. Right? So this is the part where you're doing the random walk. So you should do it in expectation. You should do n square times before you hit a satisfying assignment. And you know that if it is not satisfiable, then no matter what you do, you'll never reach a you will not reach an assignment that satisfies the formula. right? So that's where we are. So what this means is that you can have the following statement. There's a following statement about the running time of the algorithm. So if uh, I'll call it ran2sat performs a 2n squared step random walk. Okay. Suppose the ran2sat performs a 2n square step random walk, then the probability that ran2sat finds a satisfying assignment this is at least half, right? Because this is just Markov's inequality, right? Because the probability, the expected number of steps is n square. So if you run it for 2n square steps, then with probability, the probability that you need to perform more than 2n square steps is at most half. So if you perform a random walk of length 2n square, then with probability at least half, you will find a satisfying assignment, right? Now you can improve this probability. So the standard way you would want to improve is you basically repeat the ran2sat algorithm m times and accept if at least one of the runs accepts. Right? This is the standard probability amplification, right? Because you know that the probability that you will not reach a satisfying assignment is at most half. So if you do this, this will give you something like the error probability is at most 1 to the 2 power n. Right? This is the probability amplification, correct? But there is a very nice property of this random walk that we can use here. Okay, so instead of repeating so what does it mean to say repeat ran2sat algorithm m times? So what you do is you start with the assignment of which is all zeros, and you perform this random walk 2n square steps. If you have not reached a satisfying assignment, what you do is you go back to the all zeros assignment and do the random walk once more, right? You keep doing this each time you go to the all zeros assignment. But the nice thing about the random walk is that you really don't need to go all the way to the all zeros assignment to do the random walk again, right? So let's look at the slightly modified version. What you do is now you perform a 2mn squared step random walk right, starting from the assignment, right, the all zeros assignment. In the first, when you're repeating it m times, what you're doing is you're stopping it at 2n square steps and then you're restarting it again from the all zeros assignment. Here you don't restart, you just perform a 2mn square step random walk. Okay. Now I claim that this actually suffices to get the bound that we need, and that is because of a very nice property of this random walk, right? So let's look at this random walk. So you have a 2mn square step random walk. Let's split it into you know equal length parts, each of length 2n squared. Right? And say there are m such parts, right? Because you're doing this for 2mn square steps, so there are m parts. Each corresponds to a random walk of length 2n squared. The random walk starts from a bar here, right, which is the all zeros. But the assignment that you start out from here might be completely different. It might not be the all zeros. Right? But the nice property of this random walk is that, so what we've just shown is that when you start from all zeros, this probability here is the probability that you will not hit a satisfying assignment is at most half, right? But then it does not really depend on where you start out with, right? It is, even if you don't start out your random walk from the all zeros, right, which is the case when you reach here, right? Even then, if you perform a random walk, which is from some arbitrary vertex in the graph, even then, if you perform a 2n square step random walk, the probability that you will not hit a satisfying assignment is again half, right? It's again half, and more importantly, it is completely independent of the random walk that you did before, right? You don't really have to care what was the random walk that you did for the first 2n square steps. Irrespective of that, the probability that in the next 2n square steps you will hit a satisfying assignment is again half, right? There is some sort of you can just forget whatever you did. You don't really care your past history, care about the past history. All you care about is where you are right now, right? And the behavior from a particular vertex of the random walk is completely oblivious to how you reach that particular location, right? So in some sense, so therefore all of these are the probability that you will not reach a satisfying assignment is at most half, right? And therefore this again gives you an error of at most half 1 to the 2 power n, right? So you can think of this as one long random walk, right? Instead of 2n square, you do it 2mn square steps, and then the probability that you will not find a satisfying assignment is just 1 over 2 power n, right? And it's because of this very nice property of the random walk that it does not really depend on how you reach your current location, but rather where you are right now. The history is somehow irrelevant to the next step of the random walk. And this is an important property that we are going to see now. Any questions so far regarding this algorithm or the analysis? Yeah. Any questions? Okay. So then let's understand let's try to formalize this idea of this random walk and study it a little better. Okay. And to do that, we'll define what is known as a Markov chain. Okay. So to define what is a Markov chain, so consider a random process. Okay. So it is some algorithm, some process that is proceeding where at every step it has access to some random coins, and it does it uses those random bits to decide where it goes next, right? So it's a random process. What it means is that so it is evolving over time, right? It's evolving over time, and its state, the state of the system, is a random variable, right? Because the state of the system, current state of the system, depends on where it was before and the random choices that the process makes, right? So the state of the system is a random variable. So this random process, understanding this random process amounts to understanding a sequence of random variables. Okay? So let me just write it this way: a sequence of random variables, say x1, x2, x3, xt, and so on, right? Where each of these variables, right? For instance, xt, it's basically, this is the random variable corresponding to the state of the system at time I. At time t. Right? So it's a sequence of random variables, right? Each random variable is capturing the state of the system at that particular time instant. Okay. Now, for the purposes of this course, right? So we can ask what are the values that the state can take. So we'll assume that the random variables xi's take values from a finite set. In general, it need not be true, right? But for most part of this course, we will assume that it is taking values from a finite set. At max, we might say that the set is countably infinite, but probably not. I mean, it's mostly, let's assume that the values are taken from a finite set, right? So set of numbers, right? So say set of numbers 1 to n, and the state of the system is basically when these random variables take values, one of these values. So it's a finite set from where these random variables take a value. Okay. So let's define this. So a sequence x of random variables is a finite space Markov chain right? So finite space is because the random variables take values from a finite set. So finite space Markov chain if the following condition is true, right? If the probability that the current state of the system, right, is AI, given that it started from A1, then proceeded to A2, and then finally reached AI minus 1 in the I minus 1 step, right? This probability is same as the probability for xi equal to AI, given that xi minus 1 is equal to a minus 1. So this is again capturing the property that the history of how the state reached the current state, history of how the random process reached the current state just depends on the previous state, right? Because say you're in a state and you want to know where you're going to go next, right? What is the next state? That just depends on where I am right now, not on how I reached where I am. Right? So this property is what is known as the memoryless property. Right? So you have a random process which is just some, you can think of it as some algorithm or something that is that is running, right? And you want to know what is the state of the algorithm at every time step, right? Now so this random process is a Markov chain. If this random variable, the evolution of this random variable is such that if you're in a state right now, the probability of going to a particular state in the next step depends only on where you are currently, right? It does not depend on how you reach there, right? So that is what this definition is saying, right? That's why it's called the memoryless property. So a sequence of random variables, basically a random process, is a Markov chain if it satisfies this memoryless property. Okay. What we'll see is how this actually is, what is the analysis, and that random walk that underlies the analysis of two-set algorithm is actually a Markov chain. We'll see how it is, how you can correspond it to think of it as a Markov chain. Right? Any questions regarding the definition? Any questions? Okay. So let's rewrite the definition once more. Yeah, let me just write it. So what we have is that the probability that xi is ai, given that x1 is a1, right? So so given, so you know that xi is taking values, xi is take values from a finite set, right? This is something that you know. So you can write, so for I and j, in the state space of the Markov chain. Right? State space is the set from where the random variables take value. Right? So this probability, right, the probability that x t is equal to j, given that x t minus 1 is equal to I, we will denote this by Pij. Okay. So we are making one assumption here, which is basically that if you take t and t prime, right, the probability that xt is equal to j, given that x t minus 1 is equal to I, is same as the probability that xt prime is equal to j, given that xt prime minus 1 is equal to I. Okay. So it doesn't really matter at which time step you are. That the way in which you transition from one state to the other is somehow does not depend on the time step currently. Right. So this, in general, the definition does not imply this, but for now, for whatever we are going to see, we'll have this property. Right? So therefore, you can denote this probability that the probability of xt is equal to j, given that xt minus 1 is equal to I, is denoted by this number Pij. Okay? And we can draw this as a matrix, right? So we can draw this matrix with the values Pij, and this is sometimes this is referred to as the transition matrix of the Markov chain. Right? So for every I and j, you have a value, which is basically telling you what is the probability of reaching j in the current step if in the previous step you were in I. Right? And this matrix is known as the transition matrix of the Markov chain. Okay. Any questions so far?
Can you explain that T prime portion? I just missed a couple of lines.
Yeah, so I was just saying that this quantity, right? So the way it has been defined, it is possible that the probability that in the tth step you are in j, given that in the t minus first step you are in I, right? This might be different depending on t and t prime, if t and t prime are different, right? The definition does not imply that they should be same, but what I'm saying is that in our case, whatever we are going to see in this course, and it will be the case that the transition probability somehow does not depend on the time instant. Okay? That's all. So such Markov chains are called time homogeneous Markov chains. Right? So I don't want to say this explicitly, but we will make sure everything that we will see will have this property. The probability of transitioning from I to j is independent of the time at which it is going to happen. Right?
Okay, so it is just a special type.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll denote instead of writing this xt equal to j given xt minus 1 equal to I, you can say it is Pij. Right? Typically, you will not be, you will have to actually parameterize it with t as well, but because of the fact that it does not depend on t, this is the assumption that we make, we can think of it as one matrix, which is the transition matrix of this Markov chain. Right? Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. So when you look at Markov chains with the finite space Markov chains, right, or Markov chains where the state space is finite, there is a natural way in which you can associate this Markov chain as a graph. Right? So let's see that. Okay? So you can think of Markov chains as digraphs, right, or directed graphs. And how do you do that? So you have a Markov chain, right? a finite space Markov chain. And equivalently, you can construct a graph G with vertices V and E, where V, the vertex at V, is going to be the state space of the Markov chain. The vertex set of the digraph is the state space of the Markov chain, right? And the edge, right? How do we define the edges is the question, right? So the edge set E, right? So we'll say that Ij is an edge E with actually edge weight with, so with an edge weight Pij, right? Where Pij is what you have seen before, right? So this is the probability that xt is equal to j, given that xt minus 1 is equal to I, right? So you have the Markov chain. So you look at the space from which these random variables are taking values. So the vertices of this graph are going to be it's the state space of that Markov chain, right? And the way it has been defined, naturally the edge, there's a directed edge from, so this is a directed edge from I to V, right? There's a directed edge from I to V with a weight Pij, which is telling you what is the probability that the random process, the state of the random process will be in J, given that in the previous step it was in I, right? And so what this means is that the transition matrix of the Markov chain is same as the weighted adjacency graph of the matrix. Adjacency matrix, sorry, adjacency matrix. Right? So the transition matrix corresponds to the weighted adjacency matrix of this graph, right? And the evolution of the Markov chain, right? Or how the system evolves, how this random process evolves, this is equivalent to a random walk on the graph G. Right? So the system evolving is basically the random variables taking different values, right? You start with x1, which takes a value I, then in step x2, the second step, that is the random variable x2 takes some other value, and so on. And what is the next value that it can take? So that the next step, it can take many different values, and the probability that it will take a value j is the transition probability of the Markov chain, and that corresponds to starting from in x1, you're starting from a random walk from step I, in vertex I. In one step, where do you go, right? Where do you go, right? So as the evolution of the Markov chain corresponds to this random walk on this graph. Right? So there's a natural way to think of Markov chains as diagrams, and therefore understanding how a random process evolves over time, what are its properties, is equivalent to understanding the behavior of a random walk on the corresponding digraph. Right? So we are talking about finite Markov chains. Is this clear? Any questions so far? Okay. So let's go back to the 2SAT, right? So let's look at the the randomized 2SAT as a Markov chain. Right? Let's see why it is a Markov chain. Right? So So in the randomized two-set algorithm, what you have is the process is evolving. So right, it starts with an assignment, and you want to you keep finding clauses, and then you if the assignment does not satisfy the formula, you find a clause that is not satisfied, and then you try to flip a bit, right? So what is the Markov chain corresponding to this algorithm? What is a random variable that is evolving, right? To understand the behavior of the RAN2 set, what is the random variable that is evolving, right? The random variable corresponding to the Markov chain. What is that random variable? And what is its state space? The vector of bits assigned to literals, is that what you want to? So if that is the state space, your state space has size 2 power n, right? Think of the way in which we analyze the algorithm, right? The number of satisfied CIs, is that what? So how was the progress measured? Right? It was not the number of satisfied CIs, right? The progress of that algorithm, the crucial property that we are interested in that algorithm, the progress where we was measured by some other way, right? Right? The number of bits that are different from the satisfying assignment. We were interested in the Hamming distance, right? From the satisfying assignment. Right? So at every step of this algorithm, you can define, so at every step of this RAN2 set algorithm, right? You can define a random variable xi, which is the Hamming distance of the current assignment to the satisfying assignment. Right? Let's say we have fixed a satisfying assignment. Right? So it is true that the number of clauses are changing, the number of satisfied clauses are changing, the assignment is changing. But to analyze this randomized algorithm, what we are actually interested in is this Markov chain, where at every step we are interested in the Hamming distance of the current assignment to the satisfying assignment. Right? So to think about this, think back on the graph, right? So you have the connection between the Markov chain and the graph, the random two-set algorithm being thought of as a random walk on a graph, right? And the graph had n vertices basically, right? Or n plus 1 vertices somehow, right? So so what you have is, initially you start with an assignment, right, which is the all zeros assignment, and it is basically you're saying that it is starting at some point. So what is the state space of this Markov chain? Right? The state space is a set of numbers, right? The Hamming distance can be 0, 1, 2, or even n. Each xi takes a value between 0 to n, which is the Hamming distance between the current assignment to the satisfying assignment. And as the algorithm evolves, as the algorithm runs, at every step, we are actually interested in the Hamming distance of the current assignment to the satisfying assignment. That is how we were measuring progress. So to understand RAN2 set, we look at this Markov chain. And we are trying to understand the property of this Markov chain. So if you notice, so what are we interested? So let's see whether if you take this Markov chain, the graph that you construct is the same as the graph that we studied when we analyzed RAN2 set, right? That's the first thing that we should check. So what is the probability that xi is equal to j, given that x I minus 1 is equal to, sorry, is equal to j minus 1, right? This probability we know is at least half, and the probability that xi is in j, so that xi minus 1 is equal to j plus 1, this is at most half, right? This is what we had in the algorithm, right? And this is what we so if you say xi is the Hamming distance, then this is what we saw, right, when we analyzed the RAND2 set. The only thing, there's a small catch here, which is that this is not a Markov chain. There's a very small catch. And this also explains the reason why we were putting the half there. Right? This is not a Markov chain. Can you tell me why this is not a Markov chain? Right? Look at the way in which construct the graph corresponding to the RAND2 set, right, which had this property. Right? Why do you think this is not a Markov chain? It's actually not a Markov chain. To get a Markov chain, you actually have to put this as equal to half. Okay. Can you think of a reason why this is not a Markov chain? With the less than or equal to and greater than or equal to. xi plus 1 and xi minus 1 can depend on each other now. So what do you mean by that? So actually, we are not claiming independence between those two. Right? We can't claim independence between xi plus 1, and that is not being claimed in a Markov chain. Right? That is not, you can construct you can construct graphs where the third step will depend on where you are in the second step, because if you are in a particular node, vertex, you can be sure that within 2 steps you will not reach some other vertex and so on, right? We don't claim independence between these random variables, right? For instance, if your Markov chain, if you take the vertices which are for instance, if I tell you that in the first step you are in vertex 1 and vertex 10 is somewhere really far off, then you know that within 2 steps you will not reach there. Right? So we don't actually claim independence between these random variables in a Markov chain. Xi plus 1. Okay. So what you're saying is right. And the reason why what you're saying is correct is that it's because of the way in which this algorithm progresses, right? So it's also related to the comment that Raghu made in the last class, right? So he asked whether as you flip bits, isn't it possible that initially you had one unsatisfied clause, but then you have many different unsatisfied clauses, right? And the reason is related to that, because the way in which we are finding the clause to flip is in some arbitrary way. Say we find the first clause that is unsatisfied and we flip it. Okay. So it is possible that in different parts of this random walk, you will be flipping, you will be changing different clauses, right? And this transition probability actually depends on the clause in which that you're where you're going to flip, right? Because depending on the clause, it is possible that in one clause there are both the literals have to be flipped, in which case with probability 1 you will go, whereas in another clause with only probability half you might go forward, right? But then depending on the random walk, it is possible that one random walk will reach you to both random walks might take you to an assignment which is at a Hamming distance, say j from n, but then the way you have reached there might change the clauses that are available for you to flip in the next step. Okay. So you might be, so if the state just tells you the state of the Markov chain just tells you which is the bit, what is the distance of the current assignment to the satisfying assignment, right? It is possible that there are two different random walks that will reach that same state, and for these two different random walks, the clauses that are remaining, right, which are not being satisfied are different, and therefore it is possible that the transition probabilities are different. In one case the transition probability might be 1, and in another case the transition probability might be half. It will definitely be greater than or equal to half, but it is different, and it will depend on the random walk that you took until that point. Okay, so the way we have defined it, it is not exactly a Markov chain, but which is why we were actually analyzing this other case, right? So we were, instead of analyzing this random walk, we were analyzing the case where maybe I'll just write Pij itself. We were analyzing the case where Pj j minus 1 was equal to half, and which is also equal to Pj, sorry, j minus 1j. Right, both of them are half. Now this will make it a Markov chain, right? And it was sufficient to analyze this Markov chain because we saw that the actual speed with which the random two-set algorithm finds a satisfying assignment is at most the time taken by this Markov chain to reach the satisfying assignment, right? And if you define your transition probabilities this way, what you get is actually the graph that we saw, right? There are nodes corresponding to 0, 1, and up till n, and then the transition probabilities are similar, right? So you have probability of going half here and going half front, right? So so this so you can think of this random two set, the process that is being done here, as a Markov chain, right? The RAND two set algorithm is basically a Markov chain where the state of the system is the Hamming distance between the current assignment to the satisfying assignment, right? And running this random two set is basically this Markov chain evolving over time, right? And it is equivalent to the random walk on this graph that we have here, right? Any questions so far? Any clarifications? Anything that is not clear? Okay. So this is this one connection between, this one way to think of this algorithm as a Markov chain. So let's explore this a little bit further, right? So let's look at 3SAT. Okay? Let's see what happens when we study a randomized 3SAT. Okay. So this algorithm that we're going to see is due to Schuning from 99. Right. So Schuning was actually preparing to lecture on the randomized two-SAT algorithm, and he found out that there is some modifications that you can do to obtain a fast 3-SAT algorithm. And at that time, it was the fastest 3-SAT algorithm. Right. And the paper is also very easy to read. It's you can just Google this actually if you want. It's a 4-page paper. It's a very nice, well-written paper. It's very, very, very clear in the paper itself, right? Okay, so let's look at a randomized algorithm for 3SAT. So the first thing to note is that you're not going to get a polynomial time algorithm, right? You can't expect a polynomial time algorithm. 3SAT is NP complete, and it is unlikely to have efficient deterministic polynomial time, efficient deterministic algorithms, and also efficient randomized algorithms. So we can only expect for an exponential time algorithm anyway. The question is, how bad is the exponent? So the first thing to try out is, uh, run the same RAN 2-SAT algorithm and analyze. Right? I mean, we already have something with us. Why not see whether that already works, right? Why bother trying to come up with something new? Okay. So the same thing. You start with an assignment which is, say, all zeros initially, and then you find a class that is not satisfied. Flip a bit, flip one of those bits uniformly at random, and keep doing this for some number of steps. Right? Question is how many number of steps and what can you say? So once again, you can draw a graph, right? You can think of this algorithm as doing a random walk on a graph. Right? This is V0, V1, V2, V3 up till Vn. And so let's look at these edges, right? You don't want to put the weights on these edges. So this weight is going to be 1, right? So this is a place where the Hamming distance is from V0 to V1. The Hamming distance is 0. Hamming distance it is different from the satisfying assignment in every bit. So no matter which bit you flip, you will go. Yeah. A side question: do all NP complete problems not have? Yeah, none of the NP complete problems. So there's no proof for this, but we don't. Yeah. So none of the NP complete problems has a polynomial randomized algorithm. Yeah, all reduced to 3-SAT. Yeah, so that is also one reason, right? You could reduce it to 3-SAT, and then so it's not. Yeah, you could reduce it to 3-SAT and solve. That is one of the reasons. But yeah, so you don't expect any of the NP complete problems to have a polynomial randomized algorithm. In fact, you don't even expect them to have sub-exponential time randomized algorithms. They're very hard. The exponential time that you see there, that will be there even for randomized algorithms. At least that is what is believed. Right? There's no proof for it. But okay. Yeah. So what do you think these values should be? Right. The forward and backward edge weights in this graph. If you run the same RAN 2-SAT algorithm. So once again, the vertices correspond to the Hamming weight, Hamming distance, right, of the current assignment to the satisfying assignment. So what is the probability that you have gone closer to the satisfying assignment, and what is the probability that you have gone further away from the satisfying assignment? Right. So maybe I should say 3-SAT is where you have each class, right? So each class CI is of the form L1 or L2 or L3, right? That's what it means to say it is 3-SAT. There are 3 classes, 3 letters, yeah. At least 1/3, right? At least 1/3 of going forward. So it's the same observation, right? So you have CI, which is L1 or L2 or L3. Okay. If CI, the A does not satisfy the class, that means that there exists at least one literal different from the satisfying assignment. At least one bit. So that's at least, so this question mark here is at least 1/3. And what about the second question mark? Right. It's 2/3, at most 2/3. Right. It is possible that there are, say, two literals that are identical to the satisfying assignment and one literal that is different from the satisfying assignment. In which case, the only way you can proceed towards a satisfying assignment is if actually you choose that bit, right? And since you're choosing a bit uniformly at random from the three literals, you have probability 1/3 of choosing that particular bit, right? So the probability of going forward is just 1/3, whereas probability of going back is something like 2/3. Okay. So once again, to think of it as a Markov chain, we'll just put equal to here. So what you can observe here is that you are more likely to go backwards than forwards. Right? There's a greater probability of going back. You have the probability is 2/3 for actually going back, and there's only 1/3 probability of going front. Right? So if you run this the same algorithm of 2SAT for the case of 3SAT, you are more likely to go further and further away from the satisfying assignment. Right? And if you actually analyze this, that will come out as well. Right? So let's just write the expected number of steps to reach Vn. Right? So you know that Tn is 0 and T0 is 1 plus T1. And for every other I, Ti is basically 1 plus 1/3 times Ti minus 1. Oh, sorry, I plus 1 plus 2/3 times Ti minus 1. Right? You're more likely to go to I minus 1 than I plus 1. With probability 2/3, you will go back. And if you actually analyze this, what you will see is that T0 is going to be something like theta 2 power n. Okay. So if you do the the same algorithm as randomized 2SAT, right, where you start with an arbitrary assignment, the all zeros assignment, and then you just keep going forward, the expected time to reach the Vn, or expected time to reach a satisfying assignment, is 2 power n. Right? Which is not very good, which is very bad in the sense that, I mean, your brute force deterministic algorithm will achieve this bound already. Right? You don't need to do a randomized algorithm for it. Correct? And brute force algorithm is much more simpler, right? You just need to keep iterating over all the assignments. Right? So the same algorithm, if you just take RAND 2SAT and try to run it, you're not going to get anything better than brute force. Okay. So the question is, how better can you go, right? How faster can you make it? Or can you make it even faster? Right? So first, there is a very simple, so here is a very simple deterministic algorithm. Okay, so here is a deterministic 3SAT algorithm. So this is going to be slightly better than 2 power n. It's going to be asymptotically better than 2 power n. Okay? And the idea is the same as what you do, right? So what you do is you start with, suppose you do the following: start with the all zeros assignment. Okay, and let Ci, right? If Ci of a bar is 0, right, and Ci is L1 or L2 or L3, what you do is at this stage is that you branch into 3 parts, where in this branch you flip L1, in this branch you flip L2, and in this branch you flip L3. Okay. So the randomized algorithm, what it did was it chose one of these branches uniformly at random, and it went there. And the reason we were doing very badly was that it is possible that 2 of these branches are going to lead you to, assignments that are far away or something. Right? These two of these branches might not lead you anywhere. But now what you do is you keep you try all three branches. Okay? What you can say is that one of these branches is a good branch, right? One of the three takes you closer to the satisfying assignment S, right? It must be the case. And this is true at every level also. Right? So now what you do is at this stage again you will branch. Here again you will branch. At the next step you will again branch, and so on. Right? So instead of doing the randomized algorithm, you're basically brute force trying out everything. Okay. You know that at every node you will there is at least one branch where you're going towards a satisfying assignment. So if you spend n such steps, you will definitely hit a satisfying assignment. Right? Because at every step, at every level, on at least one of the nodes, you are actually closer to the satisfying assignment. And the distance of your assignment to the satisfying assignment is definitely at most n. So by the if you do n steps, you will definitely reach the satisfying assignment. What is the running time of this algorithm? Yeah, this running time seems to be even worse, right? This running time is 3 power n, right? Because there's a branch of 3 and you're doing this for n steps, right? So the running time is basically the number of nodes in this tree, so that is 3 power n. This seems to be doing worse than before. Okay. Is it clear so far? Any questions so far? So what we do next is a small observation. Okay. The way the improvement comes is because of a small observation. Right. So every satisfying assignment is at a distance, Hamming distance of at most n over 2 from the all zeros assignment or the all ones assignment. Right? Take any satisfying assignment. Right? The number of ones or the number of zeros, one of them must be less than or equal to n over 2. Right? At least one of them must be less than or equal to n over 2. Which means that every satisfying assignment is at a Hamming distance of at most n over 2 from all zeros or the all ones. Correct? So now, is this observation clear? Any questions regarding this? It's a fairly straightforward, right? Because when you take any bit string, you cannot have both zeros and ones greater than n over 2. Right? Because the length is only n, at least one of them must be less than or equal to n over 2. So now your algorithm is basically the following. You branch from the all zeros assignment till depth n over 2, and similarly you branch from the all ones assignment till depth n over 2. Right? Because you know that there is at least one branch where you're actually moving towards a satisfying assignment, and you know that if there is a satisfying assignment, it will be within depth n over 2 in either the tree starting with all zeros or the tree starting with all ones. That must be the case because of the observation that we have. So if there is a satisfying assignment, you will definitely find it within one of these two searches. Right? But now the time is just 2 times 3 power n over 2. Right? This is significantly less than 2 power n. Right? Asymptotically, it's better than 2 power n. Right? This is like theta square root 3 power n, right? Which is something like 1.7 or something, right? That's right. So it's a simple enough algorithm, right? It's sort of brute force, but then you're just a little clever to not do brute force until the very end, right? So there's definitely there is a deterministic algorithm that can beat 2 power n, right? So the question is, what can you do with a randomized algorithm? Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. So then let's go back to the randomized algorithm. Okay. We're going to look at a modified algorithm. Okay, a modified randomized three-set algorithm from the one that we saw. Okay. The first step of modification that you do, in fact, the only modification that you use, instead of starting with all zeros, you randomly choose a bar from 0, 1 to the n. You choose a random starting assignment. Okay. And then you do the same random walk. Okay. Instead of starting with the all zeros, right? Where in which case, in the worst case, you might be really far off, right? In the worst case, you might be really far off from the satisfying assignment in Hamming distance. You choose a random A. Okay. So what does that mean? So let's draw the graph again. Okay, let's go back to the graph. Okay, so you have this graph where the vertices are v0, v1, v2, and vn. So when we analyze the randomized two set, we said that in the worst case, you might be starting off from v0, right? Which is why it can take so much time. Right? Even in this case, it might be v0. In which case, for three set, the problem is that if you're really far away from vn, you're unlikely to reach that because you get pulled back much more with greater probability than being going forward. Right? So if you randomly choose an a bar, where do you end up? What is the probability that you will end up in a particular vertex? Where do you start? What is the probability distribution of your starting vertex of your random walk? Right? So now the starting vertex is not fixed. For an arbitrary assignment, it was fixed. If you choose a random A in 0, 1 to the n, the starting vertex of your random walk is a random variable. The first vertex from where you start the random walk, that is a random variable now. How is this random variable distributed? Yeah, it's binomial, right? So as Sarthak is saying, that's binomial because what you want to know, so the probability that the probability that uh, the random walk starts from Vj, right, is basically the probability that the distance between a bar and s is something like n minus j, right? The way we have drawn it, correct? Because this is the distance here is the Hamming distance. Right? So the probability that the random walk starts from Vj is the probability that the distance is n minus j. Right? which means that you choose those particular bits, right? You choose j bits which is identical to the satisfying assignment, and then the remaining is can be fixed as remaining must be different, right? So this is nothing but n choose j times 1 over 2 power j times 1 over 2 power n minus j, right? So this is the binomial distribution. So this is the probability that you will start from vertex vj. Right? Now what we want to know is what is the so here is what you want to know. So what is the probability that you will reach? So now you want to know so you want to look at, you start from j and you want to know in how many steps do you reach the vertex vn, right? So say you start from j, okay, you have so starting from vj, right? You need to take n minus j steps to reach vn, right? So let's suppose that you perform the random walk as in 2SAT for n steps. Okay. What is the probability that you will, starting from vj, you will reach vn? So definitely, so suppose I call this value pj. Okay. So let sorry. So let pj be the probability of reaching vn from vj in at most n steps, right? Now, one way that you can do this is following, right? It is possible that every step that you take, you move forward, right? It's an unlikely thing to happen, but at every step, you move one step forward. So if you think about that, this pj is at least 1 over 3 power j, 3 power n minus j, right? Because at every step, you are moving forward, right? The probability that you move forward is at least 1 over 3. So within n minus to within the probability that you will reach vn within n steps is definitely at least 1 over 3 to the n minus j. This is this very nice event that at every step you actually move forward, right? So what can you say? What is the probability that so what is the probability that this modified RAN 2SAT succeeds in n steps? So this is at least the sum over all j from 0 to n choose j times 1 over 2 power n times 1 over 3 to the n minus j, right? This is the probability that you start from vertex vj, and this is the probability that you reach vn within j steps, right? So this is nothing but 1 over 2 power n you can take outside, and this is just the binomial sum, which is 1 plus 1 over 3 to the n. So this, if you notice, it is just 2 power 3 to the n. Okay. So the probability that you will reach this algorithm will actually find a satisfying assignment is at least 2 over 3 to the n, which means that if you repeat this for say 2 times 3 over 3 to the n, then with probability at least half you will find a satisfying assignment, right? So if you run this modified 3SAT algorithm for 2 times 3 over t to the n steps, right? So you run for say 2 times 3 over 2 to the n. then with probability at least half, you will find a satisfying assignment. Right? This is the Markov inequality once again. Right? So this gives you already a faster algorithm, right? So this is now 1.5 to the n. It is better than the 1.7 that we saw just before. So what we have done is we have modified the algorithm slightly, and we have done a very, very loose analysis of this algorithm. What we will see is that we can do a tighter analysis of this algorithm, and that is going to give you the final faster algorithm for 3-set. Right? We'll go over this again in a little more detail. I think it's almost time. I think I rushed through a little bit in the end. We'll discuss the final parts once more and then give the improvement also. Right? That we will do in the next class. Okay, so that's all for now. Right? Any questions?